Good morning. I'd like to call the TABC meeting to order. The time is now 10:31 on Tuesday, June 15th, 2021. We have a quorum. And I'd like to welcome you all here. It's great to see everybody. This is kind of weird. We don't have glass or bulletproof barriers between us, so hopefully it's a start of a new trend for all of us to return somewhat to normalcy, which we all covet and welcome, especially in our industry. We also welcome Commissioner Atkins from El Paso. So Commissioner Atkins, welcome. And we look forward to seeing you as well very soon. I'd like to also wish my former branch, the United States Army, a belated happy birthday. 246 years of defending our republic. And we also have National Flag Day. So in honor of National Flag Day and the birthday of the United States Army, shall we say the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. And move to the next one. Here we go. Next agenda item is approval of commission meetings minutes as of May 25th, 2021. I so move. Is there a second?
Second.
Right. All in favor? We will now vote.
All voting.
Excellent. Thank you. Motion carries. So we've got a very important meeting today. For the first time in more than a decade, TABC is considering much needed updates to our license and permit fees, which will be something that we are going to discuss in great detail today. We're going to hear from TABC staff with their recommendations on the new state fee schedule. The legislature in 2019 took two important steps as part of the Sunset Bill. First, our lawmakers have the number of permit types issued by the agency, as most of you know, rolling up several subordinate permits and awarding a host of new privileges to thousands of business owners. They also gave TABC the ability to set its own fees in order to ensure that the cost of obtaining a license or permit is commensurate with the cost of issuing and regulating that permit. It will be up to this commission to deliberate on the new fees, provide guidance, and approve the final numbers set before the September 1st deadline set by the legislature. I hope that all of our industry partners will participate in the process, and many of you have. We have some members of industry here. We have members of industry that are going to speak during our public comments section. And we're looking forward to hearing that, and we're looking forward to a healthy discussion today with my fellow commissioners. So before we hear about fees, we have a few reports from TABC staff. And first up is our Chief Information Officer, Ms. Mosley. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Nice to be here again. Go to the next slide, please. I have a very short update for you from the agency perspective and industry's perspective on the AIMS project. We started user acceptance testing on June 8th. We're in our second week. Last week was challenging for everyone as it was new. We have 67 people who are testing the system for us. They are testing from internal perspective and external perspective. And the chart that you see on the screen, the orange indicates the number of test cases in each module. Blue line is the number of testers on those modules. So you can see that a lot of them have a big task in front of them. And then the gray line is indicating where they are in completion of those tasks. The vendor is working through the defects as they are being reported, and we do new builds twice a week. And at the end of this round, we'll have a whole new build uploaded and version, pardon me for using tech geek there, a new version for the second round starting July 13th that will run through August 9th. And at that time, we hope to have everything completed and ready to go into the stabilization period. From industry's perspective, we had a June TABC talks on onboarding last week. The reason I provided the metrics for you, we did have 82 industry participants. They asked 69 different questions. Because the number of questions were coming in so quickly on the Zoom chat, we went ahead and just held the TABC talks as long as we needed to get through all the questions. So it lasted about 1.5 hours. We do owe some answers back. They asked some questions that wasn't exactly Ames specific, so I wanted to make sure the right division directors got back with them. So we are working on that, and we'll be posting those answers soon. And I just wanted you all to once again be aware, we are starting the onboarding process with industry. That will be all of the manufacturers, all distributors, all brew pubs, and then any tier 3s who have a license that expires in September or October. So we will have over 11,500 that we will be onboarding in September. So that's a big hit for the number of industry people, and I wanted you all to be aware that we are in communication with them. We are working closely with them to make sure that they are comfortable with the process, and then obviously after the process. And on the last, sorry, I didn't ask you to change slides, sorry. So if you want to go 2 slides up to the last slide. Just go 1 more. That is the number that I live with. It goes down every day. My anxiety, for a different metric for you all, my anxiety goes up as that number goes down. But we are in great shape, and that concludes my presentation unless anyone has a question.
Commissioners, any questions? You know, from a perspective of trying to assist in streamlining this process, this technology, this technological breakthrough, the resources that were given us by the legislature, which will help us to not only better regulate, but also will assist the industry in streamlining the process and licensing and all the things that, you know, we've been wanting to do for many, many years. Technology is expensive, and we're just grateful for all the work that you and your staff have done.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Excuse me, bear with me 1 moment. Thank you. Next agenda item is Ames education update. To continue the theme, Director Black.
Good morning, Chairman Lilly and Commissioners. It's so nice to see you all in person. It's been a while, so it's great to see your smiling faces, and of course look forward to Commissioner Atkins joining us as soon as he can as well. And thank you so much for the opportunity for me to provide you an update on our communication and education efforts for Ames. Obviously, our Chief Information Officer did a great job of rolling out and talking about what is happening with Ames, and I'm going to focus on our education and outreach efforts. So next slide, please. We are focusing on the 3 E's of success: education, explanation, and expectations. All 3 of these items intersect, and by ensuring we are providing our stakeholders with these 3 E's, we will set up industry for a successful transition to Ames. So let's break them down for you. Next slide, please. We are providing industry members Ames education in several ways. We're holding monthly TABC talks, which are interactive webinars, where one of our subject matter experts provide an in-depth look at an Ames process. We're regularly posting new FAQs on the website, and we develop these from the frequently asked questions that we're receiving from stakeholders. And then in August, we will launch Ames education sessions, and these sessions will last all year long. There are virtual meetings where stakeholders who are set to onboard on Ames in the next month will get detailed instructions on the process they must undertake. Next slide, please. TABC is providing detailed explanation of Ames in our monthly emails, our weekly industry newsletter, and through videos. We're working to reach industry where they're most comfortable, either through video content, written content, or infographics. We want to explain who, what, when, where, why, and how. Next slide, please. The team understands that setting expectations is critical. That's why we're constantly pushing information on what Ames can and cannot do. We want to do everything we can to make sure our industry members are not surprised come September 1st. We're doing this on the TABC website, social media, and providing this information on hard copy letters. As Commissioner Atkins mentioned during the May Commission meeting, not everyone gets their information digitally, so we want to make sure we get them where they receive it. Next slide, please. You may recall that the last commission meeting, I talked about how we're using unique page views on our TABC 2021 website to gauge our engagement efforts. I'm happy to report we're on target by reaching 42% of our goal of getting 60,000 unique views. So that's good news, good reporting. With that, I will conclude my presentation, and of course, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions? Having heard none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. The next agenda item is budget update with Director Mayo.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Chairman, Commissioners. Welcome back. And Commissioner Atkins, welcome back virtually. For the record, my name is Vanessa Mayo. I serve as your Chief Financial Officer for the agency. I'm going to do a brief update on our budget impact from the 87th legislative session. I will note, though, Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 2, which were the bills that gave us funding, have not been signed by the governor as of today. So we are waiting for that, but we expect to hear within the week. Next slide, please. All right, so adopted items. Our exceptional item funding for the licensing and tax technology was funded at our full request of about $4.3 million. Schedule C received a statewide pay increase, and that was funded as that is a legislative mandate. We did receive about $3.9 million over the biennium for that new pay increase for all of our commission peace officers on Schedule C. So that's great news. A few riders were updated for us as well. We have a new rider that now allows us a $5,000 hiring incentive for hard-to-fill positions for our commission peace officers. For example, Odessa Midland area, when the cost of living went up greatly because of the fracking and the oil boom in that area, we had a very difficult time recruiting in that area. So now we have the ability to do a $5,000 hiring incentive. This is not funded, so this would be in our current appropriation, and we will have a policy that will basically dictate how we will handle this. Next up, we have a clothing allowance rider that's currently already in the books, so that's for our commissioned peace officers as well. In the past, that was limited to only ranks of agent. We have had that amended, so now everyone on Schedule C will be entitled to a clothing rider, which is $500 a year. Lastly, we had a rider for purchase of evidence, so we do have a cash fund that is through our appropriation as well that we utilize for undercover operations. Our agents use that to keep cover, buy drinks, whatnot. We had that capped at $50,000. We've now bumped that up to $150,000, which helps us from an accounting perspective. With SIU running more and more operations, it was becoming very difficult for us to reconcile that monthly and stay under the $50,000 cap. So the $150,000 will help us greatly. My accounting team is very happy to have this increase. Again, that's not a funding issue. It's just authority to allow us to bump that up to $150,000. So that's good news for us as well. Lastly, the executive director pay for TABC was moved into a different section of Article 9. So that is now in section 3.04, C6, which has a listing of several different agencies. We've now been moved into that listing. And then lastly, our FTE count overall was reduced by 28 FTEs. So our max FTE count currently is at 640, and that includes 5 FTEs that we received for the licensing and tax technology. So that was a one-time deal. So next biennium, essentially we would be back down to 635. Next slide, please. So this is a quick snapshot, our budget by strategy. As you know, we do everything by strategy. This does not include the amounts I just mentioned for licensing and tax technology and the previous Schedule C pay increases. So this is essentially our baseline. I wanted to show that independently. This does include the 5% budget cut that we experienced this biennium. And so our overall biennial total is about $97 million. Again, and this is broken out by strategy. If we add in our one-time funding, we're closer to 105 million for the biennium. That concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?
Just a comment, I wanted to also, I think you may have mentioned this, clarify that fortunately, all of the state police forces were given a raise, a much needed raise to make us hopefully more competitive with municipal police departments that pay, in some cases, excessively, in excess of what we do. So Parks and Wildlife, Department of Public Safety, and TABC, all of our agents will receive a raise, which we're delighted to hear. I also wanted to just mention in that vein that obviously there was a tragic shooting that occurred in Austin very recently. And it reminds us of, the ones that ran to the sound of the guns are the ones carrying the badges. And we should always remember and be thankful for our law enforcement personnel who go into harm's way virtually every day. Fortunately, no licensed establishments were involved, but that does not diminish the tragedy that occurred and also the continued need for robust law enforcement presence in our state, in our cities, in our communities. So I'm glad that we were able to get that. So thank you for all your great effort.
Thank you.
All right, so consistent with our desire to hear from our industry members and the public, our next agenda item is public comment. General Counsel Smith, I believe we have some individuals signed up to speak. Is that correct?
We do, Chairman. We have one in-person comment and we have 3 virtual comments.
Excellent, thank you. So
So if I may start with our in-person comment, I'd like to introduce John Lamb. So if you would like to come up and make your comment, and if you'll indulge me, I just want to introduce John real quick. John's a friend and he's a businessman here in Austin. And if this was important enough for John that he came down here to meet with us on the day that his second brewery is opening up in Cedar Park.
Right now.
John,
can we go after the meeting?
Absolutely. That's where I'm at. So.
and yes, Chairman, he makes IPA.
Yes, glad you make IPAs.
John, state your name and then who you're commenting on behalf of.
Okay, Chairman Lilly and Commissioners, thank you for having me, first of all. John Lamb, co-owner of Red Horn Coffee House and Brewing Company, and now officially Red Horn Brewery and Roastery also. But I'm here representing specifically the Texas Craft Brewers Guild. I am on the board of directors for the Guild, and I'm also the co-chair for the Government Affairs Committee for the Guild. So I'm here representing the Guild at large, as well as specifically brew pubs in the case of fees and licenses, permit fees. So again, thank you, and I want to thank General Nettles and the staff for working with us, all the hard work that's gone into this. We talked at length about, especially coming from a small business owner, there's a lot to do, a lot of hats to wear, so making the world of permits and licenses less complicated is certainly appreciated, and we're grateful for that. So a couple of things. Our primary concern with this fee structure and the proposed fees are really the brew pub model. If we step back and look at all of the fees and how everything is laid out, we recognize that we've identified that out of our 300 plus members of brew pubs in the state, we know that there are some large county members, and there are members that are in smaller counties. And we have seen a significant increase in brew pubs specifically, more specifically outside of those 4 large counties that have higher fees to begin with. So we're seeing an increase of over $1,500 in fees every 2 years, which is a 67% increase. Very difficult, especially given the year we've all had. Everybody knows that. We understand that even the agency has had difficulties with budgets. But coming out of a year that we've had and potentially never coming out of the hole that we got ourselves into, now we're, in addition to that, seeing pretty significant increases. Also something to note, if you think about the outside counties, we have a lot of members, specifically 71% of our brew pub members do not operate in those 4 counties. So we're talking about a vast majority of our membership seeing a very large increase in fees. Some other things to consider are these are members that arguably were hit the hardest. They're not in densely populated areas, not all of them. We exist in the suburbs, so we were impacted certainly, but those that are in downtown areas and areas that are densely populated,
little bit less impacted. So, these are small businesses that are struggling to get out of a hole. And again, we're not here to dictate fees or, how things need to be massaged or managed. But we just see a pretty large disparity in how fees were structured across all members, including non-resident manufacturers, et cetera. So we just wanted to touch on that. And we understand that, there's fees associated. We talked with the staff and their administration managing our licenses and permits. But logically, we just look at this and think that, some of those burdens are being absorbed. We're doing our own audits now. So we not only are paying higher fees, but we're taking on the burden of doing some of our own audits. And so at any rate, we just wanted to talk through that. And that's one of our biggest concerns. We also have less rights than a lot of our manufacturing partners. Or we're limited on some of our self-distribution. I'll also throw in, I applaud the bill that was passed for March to go. There was a lot of great work that was done for the retail members of our industry, but brew pubs were explicitly left out of some of that bill, or actually all of that bill. So we're not able to participate in what's now a new revenue stream for a lot of retailers, yet our fees are continuing to go up. So we just wanted to address the fact that things just seemed a little bit out of balance, and so we wanted to address it. So that's what I wanted to talk about. We also noticed, again, we're not here to dictate, but we recognize that now our fees are, as brew pubs and retailers, we are now above all manufacturers. We're now going to be paying $3,900 versus our manufacturing members that are going to be paying less, more along the line of $34. So just trying to understand that and how those huge increases came about. And I could be misstating a little bit of the numbers, but I should be pretty close.
John, I apologize. I should have mentioned that we're trying to keep it 2 minutes.
Okay, I wasn't sure, so yeah. So I can end there, but I also wanted to state, one thing we noticed is a huge decrease in non-resident manufacturers coming into the state. And, as Texas owned and operated businesses that not only generate excise tax, but also state sales tax for our state, it's just hard to swallow as a small business, seeing out-of-state manufacturers seeing decreases in fees while we're seeing increases. So that was it. I've obviously gone well beyond my 2 minutes, but I appreciate your time. So.
That is just fine. Appreciate your discussions, your concerns, and your transparency.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for being here.
All right. Thank you all for your time. Any questions?
Just 1 second. Am I allowed to ask him a question? Is that part of the?
Fire away.
Okay. Just if you can do it in a minute or less, I would like you to go back to the limited distribution issue that you brought up earlier, kind of halfway through your presentation.
There are, so as brew pubs, we're grateful.
The part that you were left out of the bill.
Oh, the part that,
Yeah.
So we as brew pubs, retailers can now, there's some delivery components to the bill. There's also third-party delivery components, and then also containers to go. We can obviously sell beer to go, which was the lifeblood for our businesses.
Right.
But the third-party deliveries and delivery direct to consumer, brew pubs were explicitly written out of that. By written out, I mean explicitly not allowed to do those things that now retail members, more specifically, I think beer and wine, but also mixed beverages can participate in. So I cannot, somebody can come pick up beer to go, but if I was to deliver tacos from my brew pub, I can deliver tacos and coffee, but I cannot deliver beer. Whereas retailers down the street that aren't brew pubs can deliver it all.
Okay.
So,
That's what I thought. Thank you very much for that clarification. Thank you for your time.
thank you.
We can now move to the virtual public comment. And as I understand it, I'll state your name, and then if you can unmute yourself and go ahead and identify yourself and who you're commenting on behalf of. And if you're able to keep it under 2 minutes, we'd appreciate it. So I'll start with Mr. Justin Engel. Mr. Engel, are you able to unmute yourself to make your comment?
Oh, there you go. Hello, can you hear me?
Sure.
Okay. Hi, good morning, commissioners. My name is Justin Engel. I'm with Houston Cider Company. Today, I'd like to discuss the new permit structure and the new fees, specifically for winery permits. The idea of bundling the subordinate permits and charging equally amongst the holders is a kind of a disservice to TABC and the wine industry. Bundling the 6 permits and its subordinates together is a good idea. However, the prices associated with that is not. Briefly, there are 694 permitted winery holders. Of those, 20 hold the private storage L permit, 21 hold the public storage K permit, and 3 hold the winery storage permit. With House Bill 1545, greatly known as the Sunset Bill, the idea was to eliminate the subordinate permits and allow the industry to use the subordinate permitted operations under normal operations. Are all 694 permit holders going to use the private storage, public storage, or winery storage privileges? Probably not. Is there a winery that uses all 3 storage options? According to TABC public data, no. In fact, the elimination of the subordinate permits saves TABC valuable time and resources by the elimination of paperwork and reduction of auditing and regulatory expenses. Based on the 694 winery permit holders and all subordinate permits held, TABC received in 2020 $951,020 to the Texas General Fund. Under the new structure, TABC will receive $2,359,600 to the general fund, representing a 240% revenue increase. We, as the winery permit holders, were told that the new fee structure was to be revenue neutral. I am having a very hard time seeing how this is actually revenue neutral. The new fee structure is also anti-competitive and anti-Texan. Based on the new fee structure, TABC is valuing out-of-state wineries and direct shippers over Texas wine producers, charging in-state producers $3,400, but charging $1,400 for out-of-state wineries for nearly the same privileges will kill the Texas producers. In 2020, over $17 million was generated by winery excise tax revenue, which pays for TABC operational expenses, including regulatory auditing, criminal investigation, and public safety efforts. When in-state wineries are paying nearly $1 million in permit fees plus nearly $17 million in excise tax fees, TABC can potentially have a very large operational budget just to monitor the winery producers. I understand that TABC must draw a fine line when determining permit fees. Currently, the weighted average permit fee for in-state wineries is $1,370 for all permits, subordinates, and secondary location permits. The 250% increase to the $3,400 new fee will close many Texas producers and will also close secondary locations that generate sales tax income for the state through tourism dollars. The increase in fees for in-state producers will be extremely revenue depleting due to losses in sales tax revenue, losses in excise tax revenue, losses in permit renewal revenue, and decreases in revenues associated with closing businesses. Currently, Texas also leads the nation in the highest winery permit fee for both in and out-of-state producers. This is an anti-business practice that leads to Texas generating fewer excise tax dollars and leads to inconsistent practices in the alcohol industry, as well as creating a black market. To remove the barriers of entry, the lower the permit fees for both in and out-of-state producers, TABC and Texas will see increases in excise tax revenue and sales tax revenue, greatly making up the differences in permit fee losses. The idea that manufacturing permits alone pay for increases in regulatory costs are slightly laughable, and this is what was being told from us by the co-directors of rules. It is recommended that TABC adopt a fee for G permits, DS permits, and S permits equally and to not cost more than $1,300. This is still extremely high amongst pure states. If I had my way, I would set the permit to be no more than $150, which is the national average and the current TABC fee minus the surcharge eliminated by sunset. Along with the TABC permit fee increase, local municipalities are looking at the new fee structure and already licking their lips. For my company based in the city of Houston and Harris County, we are having to pay the city of Houston and Harris County an additional $6,800 up from the $150 normally charged. All said and done, my winery will be paying $10,200 in a tough budget year, up from $1,601, a 630% increase with only a 2-month notice. Across Texas, this amount will shutter wineries, kill tourism, lower excise taxes, lower sales tax income, and create bigger black markets. I implore the commission to reconsider the new permit fee structure and to make it equitable to all wineries, competitive amongst peer states, and to be pro-Texan. And with that, I thank you for your time and ask for any questions.
Thank you for your comments, sir.
Actually, I have one question. He references creates black markets. Can you expand on that? Or Clark, can you tell us, is it just people trying to avoid paying the permit fee and selling without the permit? I'm not sure what.
So Mr. Engel, I don't know if you're able to hear Commissioner Mack's question, but could you elaborate on your statement that this could contribute to a black market?
Sure. It's known with the Wine Institute that a lot of wineries and direct shippers avoid paying the TABC permit fees to either direct ship or to be a non-resident seller. And with that, they ship cases of wine to basically anyone without paying the actual permit fees to TABC and the excise taxes, basically creating a black market that TABC can not regulate the amount of wine or types of wines being shipped to homes and houses across the state. So essentially, if I was a producer in California that produced maybe 500 cases of wine, and in order to sell that wine to Texas, because I had a couple of people visit my winery from vacation, I would have to pick up the either direct shippers or non-resident sellers permit and then get the wine label approved in Texas. Instead, if I was at winery, I would just forego the $1,400 permit fee and just directly sell that wine to the consumer. TABC would not know anything. That's where the black market's created. Increasing the permit fees will increase the more wineries out of state that will contribute to this black market practice.
Okay, thank you. Good clarification. Any other questions? All right, thanks, Clark.
So next we have Ms. Stephanie Bartlett. Ms. Bartlett, if you're able to unmute yourself, introduce yourself and who you're commenting on behalf of. Ms. Bartlett, if you're on the line, could you unmute yourself? Okay, so next up we have Ms. Lydia Melendez. Ms. Melendez, if you could unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and who you're commenting on behalf of.
She's not available.
With that, I think we've completed our public comment period.
Okay. All right.
Mark, real quick, I'm just looking at this. This is Commissioner Atkins. It looks like one of these participants is called in via their phone, which means they probably need to hit a star something in order to unmute themselves. Does someone have those instructions just in case they're trying to unmute and are unable to?
An important question, and I'm not exactly clear, right?
They don't have to do that.
Star set.
Yeah, they shouldn't have to do that. It's simply a unmute.
If they've called into the meeting?
Yes, they called into the public comment line.
It's popping up every time.
So if Ms. Bartlett or Ms. Melendez is able to unmute, then we obviously want to hear your comment.
I want to say something.
Oh, yes. Yes, Commissioner Marino would like to make a comment.
I just want to make sure, I appreciate everybody coming down personally, as well as being online with us to talk about the fee structure. It's not an easy process for any of us, especially those that it directly is going to impact. And so I just want you to know that your comments are not going on deaf ears. I know Ms. Horton and her team has been extremely diligent in making sure that the lines of communication are open to where we can take this input and see what we can do to advocate for each of the industries. And so just wanted to make sure that, we're all aware that it is not, it is a difficult time and your words are not going unheeded.
Thank you. All right, that concludes public comment. The next agenda item is consideration potential action on publication of proposed amended rules 33.2, 33.3, 0.5, 0.10, 0.16, 0.29, 0.43, 0.44, 0.45, and 0.3390. And new rules 33.24, 33.25, and 33.26. Ms. Horton.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. It is good to see you all back here in person, and I hope to see Commissioner Atkins soon as well. The rules this time have been broken up, as you can see, so that the consideration of the fees, it will be entirely separate. So hopefully we can get through the other ones quickly and spend our time on that. This first item are some essentially non-substantive changes to the same chapter, chapter 33, that are the second phase of a reorganization of that chapter and is going to cut the number of rules down significantly and just tighten everything up. If you have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer them. If not, the proposal is up for your consideration and decision.
Are there any questions or comments? Commissioner Atkins, any questions from El Paso?
No, not on 4.1.
You. All right, I move to approve publication and proposed amended rules and new rules in agenda item 4.1 as recommended by staff. Is there a second to the motion? Second. Thank you, sir. I have a second. We will now vote. All right. Votes have been recorded. The motion is approved. All right. The next agenda item is consideration of potential action on publication of proposed repeal of rules 33.9, 0.11, 0.12, 0.15, 0.25, 0.26, 0.27, 0.28, 0.30, 0.31, 0.32, 0.37, 0.38, and lastly, 33.39. Ms. Horton.
Okay. The Texas Register requires us to publish separately for repeals. It's just one of their procedural requirements, which is why it's a separate agenda item. But it is part and parcel with the immediately preceding agenda item. These are repeals of rules that have been incorporated elsewhere or simply moved up. So rather than saying in one rule package, we can't say we're moving this from here to here. We have to adopt it in one rule package and then repeal it from the other place in another proposal. So that's what this proposal is all about. It's the repeals that are associated with those moves.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, that's explanatory. So I move to approve publication and proposed repeal of rules in agenda item 4.2 as recommended by staff. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Boatright. We have a second. We will now vote.
All voting.
All right, thank you. Motion is approved. Right. The next agenda item is consideration and potential action on publication of proposed amended rules 45.1, 0.2, 0.4, 0.5, 0.25, 0.26, 0.27, 0.30, 0.40, 0.41, 0.42, 0.43, 0.50, 0.106, 0.113, 0.117, and 0.131, as well as new rules 45.51, 45.121 through 45.1 45.127. And lastly, 45.130.
Good job.
And anybody who can say all that back without stopping gets, I'll buy an IPA at your brewery. Good grief. All right, thank you, Ms. Horton.
Okay, chapter 45. This rule package has a few reasons behind it. One is that we are reviewing our rules on the 4-year cycle. So there are some just sort of cleanup and consistency type changes that are in these rules. Second, the legislature in a sunset bill required beer manufacturers to put, actually, is it beer? Yes, alcohol content by volume on all of their labels.
Right.
So this package also includes some rules related to that that allows them some time to use up any cans or bottles they may already have printed before they need to have those new cans. So it gives those folks a little bit of time to reduce the waste that could happen. And then third, we also had to readopt some rules that we were actually repealed last year, the end of the year. They are advertising and marketing rules that actually exist at the federal level as well. But on advice of council, it's just safer for us to have them in our rules, makes it easier for us to enforce them independently from the federal government. It shouldn't make any difference to the regulated community. They're already doing all of these things, and they were actually in our rules up until December. So those are the 3 things that you'll see in this long list of amended and new rules, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Just comment, I think it's a terrific move. You know, as 30 years ago, basically all beer was whatever, 4%. Now you can buy, I'm sure you've got some IPAs that are probably 9+. And I think it's important that the public knows what they're drinking. And, 1 beer can equal 3 if you're not careful. So I think this type of disclosure, I think is a public safety issue. And I think it's important. I'm glad we're doing it. Those are my only comments. Any other comments? All right. So I move to approve publication of the proposed amended rules and new rules on agenda item 4.3 as recommended by staff. Is there a second, please? Second. Thank you, Commissioner Mack. We have a second. We'll now vote.
All voted.
Thank you. Our votes have been recorded. The motion is approved. All right. Next agenda item is consideration of potential action on publication of proposed repeal of 45.22 and 45.121. Ms. Horton.
This is similar to your last repeals. Again, these 2 rules are simply being proposed to be adopted in different places within chapter 45.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments? No. And I keep getting the please unmute myself. All right.
Just click later.
Oh, later, got it. Okay, I move to approve publication and propose a repeal of rules 45.22 and 45.121 as recommended by staff. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, ma'am. And a second, we will now vote.
All voted.
Thank you. Votes have been recorded. The motion is approved. Next agenda item is consideration and potential action on publication of proposed amendment to Rule 33.23. Ms. Horton.
Okay, now for the main event. I'm going to first talk about our guiding principles in this process. We'll do a brief process overview and then cover in a little bit more detail some of the most common questions that we've gotten about our process. Then we'll talk about what the next steps are and then briefly address the timing. So I'm going to try to get through this relatively quickly, but this is an important item, so I want to make sure getting it all out there for you to really fully understand and appreciate.
Take your time.
So our guiding principles, of course, come from the legislature and from the Sunset Bill when Alcoholic Beverage Code Section 5.50 was amended. And it states the commission shall develop a process for setting fees that ensures the amount of fees for an original or renewal certificate, permit, or license is sufficient to cover the costs incurred by the commission in administering this code. The process had to allow us to consider the level of regulatory activities associated with each certificate, permit, or license, allow us to set different fees for the same, for original or renewal if that was appropriate, and ensure that we did not overly penalize any segment of the alcoholic beverage industry or impose an undue hardship on small businesses. These were the principles that guided us in the fee setting process. To begin that process, we assembled a task force from across the agency, including licensing, audit, tax and marketing, legal, and law enforcement. Next, each division analyzed the level of regulatory activity for their division for each license and permit type. The legislature intended for the agency to collect about the same amount of revenues from the new fees as we did from the old ones. So we used revenues collected in the 2018-2019 biennium from fees and permits, from permit and license fees as our target. The fees were then allocated across the new license and permit types according to regulatory activity analyses provided by each division, with greater weight given to law enforcement activities. Finally, we made sure that fees for licenses with similar scopes of privilege had the same or similar fee. So as you can see, we attempted to be revenue neutral, and we based our initial analysis primarily on the level of regulatory activity. Next, the stakeholders were invited to review the proposed fees beginning on May 19th, and a stakeholder Zoom meeting was held on June 2nd. Some fees were actually reduced in response to stakeholder feedback when they provided a compelling policy argument and supported it with data. For example, the craft brewers have been in contact with us, and we recognize that they have to hold several different types of licenses and permits for their business model. And so we actually reduced one of those by $500 to make it more equal to similarly situated businesses in that part of the market. And again, and with Mr. Engel's concerns, the direct shippers, we recognize that there are a lot of small businesses that do direct shipping. We didn't want to overly penalize them. And to his point, we don't want people, we understand there's an issue with people not getting permits and just trying to skate by and not pay excise taxes or get permits. So we don't want to exacerbate that problem. So we did drop that direct shipper fee to a level that we think won't discourage people from getting it from us. So those are some changes that we made in response to stakeholder comment already. However, of course, that stakeholder comment is not over. We still have 30 days after publication, and we can make more changes in that time. So that's where we are. I did want to provide a little bit more detail on some of the reasoning behind our process, because we've gotten a lot of questions, and these are kind of some of the questions that we've been getting. The reason we started with the most recent biennial revenues collected from licensing fees and surcharges rather than adding up prior fees plus the surcharges or subordinates. We had to ensure the amount of fees is sufficient to cover the costs incurred by the commission in administering the code. The recommendation adopted by the Sunset Commission was that adopted fees should not affect total revenue TABC currently raises through licensing fees and surcharges. As you know, we are what some call a self-funding agency, which means that fees, fines, and other miscellaneous revenues as authorized and generated by our operations must cover at a minimum the cost of legislative appropriations, as well as other direct and indirect costs. Those direct and indirect costs include things like employee benefits, pensions. It's a large part of our revenue that we need to collect. Let's see. There's also a more fundamental reason not to use the current fees and subordinates and surcharges to determine the appropriate fees going forward. As explicitly recognized by the Sunset Commission in directing the overhaul of the fee structure, the current fees and surcharges lack a logical, consistent basis. They were not based on regulatory activity levels, the cost of agency services, or the value of privileges associated with each license, permit, or certificate. Using such fundamentally flawed fees as a baseline would be contrary to the intent of the legislature in requiring the agency to set new fees to replace the current hodgepodge of fees and surcharges. Before selecting this process, we did consider several options, including basing the new fees on adding together prior license fees and surcharges, plus subordinate privileges now included with them, what I'll call the adding up method. There were several reasons doing so would not have fulfilled the legislature's requirements. First, as I just explained, the prior fees and surcharges didn't have a logical basis, and the legislature wanted us to fix that, not keep them. Second, because we don't know how exactly the new license and permit types are going to shake out as we go from 75 to 37 and businesses reemerge from pandemic shutdowns, this adding up method would not provide any assurance that the agency would collect the required revenues. That can really only be achieved by starting with the target revenue figure and working backwards because of all of those unknown variables. Third, simply adding the prior fees and surcharges for primary permits and subordinates would result in some businesses paying too high of fees and others paying far less with no rhyme or reason, magnifying the unfairness inherent in the current structure. And I'll give you an example. If you have a beer producer that self-distributes, they would end up paying, if you just added everything up that they need, over $7,000 for those privileges. And we had proposed $4,800. So that would just exacerbate, they've already got things that are too high, they've got too many things that they have to have. If we just added them all together, it would be out of whack with others in that corner of the market. Here's an example of one that might be disproportionately low. Right now, compared to another producer of alcohol, wineries are paying $851. We have proposed a fee of $3,400. Most of them also have a private carrier's permit, winery festival permit, so they pay a total right now of $1,163. So, the authority of these two permits are rolled in and separate permits are no longer required, but compared to the brewery, the winery has more privileges, but would still be paying less. So we were trying to sort of make sure that we didn't have those inequities that were inherent just be exacerbated by adding them together and starting from there. Why do we base on regulatory activity? We were required to by the legislature and Alcoholic Beverage Code 5.50. We had to include the type of business being regulated, the level of regulatory activities, ensure that we did not overly penalize any segment of the industry or impose an undue hardship on small businesses. So the first phase was consideration of the level of regulatory activities. The second phase involved leveling out fees for licenses and permits with similar privileges so as not to overly penalize any segment of the industry. And the third phase involved listening to stakeholder input regarding hardships on small businesses and making adjustments as appropriate to support robust participation in the Texas alcoholic beverage market, and we're continuing to do that. We believe this process implements the legislature's instructions to the agency and effectuates the intent of the sunset legislation. Additionally, we've been in consultation with the Office of the Governor, and they have indicated their approval of our process. Law enforcement input was weighted heavier than the other divisions for several reasons. I want to explain that a little bit. Almost half of our agency's employees are law enforcement officers, and the other half is divided up among all of the other divisions. So weighting their activities more than, for example, tax and marketing is a fair representation of the distribution of regulatory efforts and resources. Also, we must account for human trafficking law enforcement activities that we gained as a priority, the costs of which are not represented by a license or permit fee. So the legislature added human trafficking as one of our top priorities, and the law enforcement division is the primary division that's directing their resources toward that activity. This process recognizes that the agency's law enforcement activities are of the utmost importance because they directly protect the health and safety of the citizens of Texas. The next steps, as I stated earlier, we've got a 30-day comment period that will commence we are taking comments now, but the 30 days will commence upon publication in the Texas Register. On July 13th, we will hold a public hearing on the proposed rules. And then this should be back before you in August in order for us to get it done in time for our September 1st deadline. I wanted to talk a little bit about timing. We acknowledge, obviously, that the timing for these changes presents a challenge for our regulated community coming out of pandemic shutdowns. Our stakeholders have been financially hit harder than other business sectors. We did not want to go through the public participation part of this process during the COVID emergency when businesses had existential matters to attend to and wouldn't have had the bandwidth to really participate. We only started coming out of the crisis in March, but by then we were in the most critical part of the legislative session. And for the same reason, limited bandwidth, we did not want people to have to try to focus both on important statutory changes that might happen and rule changes at the same time. On the other hand, we do have that September 1 deadline, and we cannot legally delay any longer. So that's just an explanation of why we're here now, and recognition of the fact that this does present a challenge, and we hear you, and we're doing what we can to help you out. If you've got reasons that the business would be unfairly impacted, please come talk to me. Our door is open. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions about Rule 33, 2023 as proposed.
All right, who wants to start?
I have just a quick one. So I know your team has worked diligently with everyone who's going to be involved and impacted. So I appreciate that. In the statistics, though, can you address the last time TABC actually adjusted the rates or fees?
Sure, I can't be completely specific, and somebody else might be able to be more specific, but I know that most fees haven't been addressed in 10 years. Others haven't been addressed in 15, and some haven't significantly changed since 1983.
So it's fair to say our population and, I mean, just the demographics in the state of Texas itself has changed significantly, as well as the industries. So I thank you for the clarification.
Chairman, I have a question.
Go ahead, Commissioner Atkins, please, from El Paso.
Swarton, you talked about the ability to continue to make changes. I want to clarify this process because I think some great points were brought up earlier in the public comment. Nothing that I can take action on today, but I would like to research a little bit further. So we are right now looking to publish these, and then in August we will be adopting. Can we make a change and still adopt it in August if we choose to lower a fee?
So it's my opinion and my interpretation of the Administrative Procedure Act that you need to republish a rule if you make a change that's going to negatively impact someone. So if you're going to expand a rule to impact more of the regulated industry, or if you're going to increase the fee, obviously, or impact any of their other rights. I don't think the same holds true for decreasing a fee.
So we could, again, publish as they have been processed today. And by the way, I have to comment, the amount of work that you've done has been absolutely tremendous. And working with the industry, I think, has been phenomenal. To have the two speakers that we had today, which had some valid points, but that all being the only ones that have been addressed today is a compliment to all the work that you've done in working with industry to develop these. So I thank you for that. But we can then move forward with the publication of the proposed amendment as it stands today, continue to get that additional feedback over the next 30 days, and then either adopt as was proposed today or potentially adopt with some decreases in fees at that August meeting.
Absolutely. And I want to mention, since you mentioned all the work that went in, I also want to thank Mary Ann Morlock, Sippy. She was my partner throughout all of this. I want to thank Kevin Schwaller in communications. He put together a lot of those infographics that have been so helpful in explaining this to our stakeholders and really for me to understand it too. They've done some really good work, and I would also direct anyone who's watching and has questions about this to go to our website and take a look at all of those materials that communications has put together on our website. They are very, very helpful. So,
Thank you.
Commissioner Boatright.
First of all, good job from a technical perspective on these. These are difficult rulemakings. You've done a good job. So has everyone else who's worked on it. Appreciate your work. It's good lawyering, and I like that. I do have concerns about the fees. I don't like the fact that a lot of them are being raised, period. Especially at the end of a pandemic when a lot of our licensees and permittees had such a hard time.
Sunset Bill allows us to raise or lower based on things like regulatory costs, cost of administering the code, stuff like that. So if our costs are actually increasing, if the cost of the cost of administering the code with respect to individual licenses, if our regulatory costs with respect to individual licenses are increasing, then I think that we can increase the fees. Some of the other criteria that are used don't seem to me to be related to regulatory costs, the costs of administering the code. They are important factors, public safety, extremely important, extent of privileges. I don't really like the use of the word privilege in this context, but I understand it's an old term of art in our code, and that's okay. It seems like these are going up, which I don't like, and they're going up based on criteria that aren't authorized by the statute. They aren't expressly prohibited by it either, but they aren't authorized by the statute. We're importing other considerations outside the text of the statute in order to meet a revenue target. That doesn't seem to me to be how this is supposed to have gone. The fiscal note to the Sunset Bill, I know that we're allowed to take into account IT systems. I know we've had huge IT expenditures lately. That's fine. That's relevant. We can do that stuff. But things outside of regulatory costs, things outside of cost of administering the code, seem to me to be illegitimate criteria to use to raise fees on licenses and permits on businesses that have just gone through hell, a lot of them. Anyway, you and I have already discussed that. You knew I was going to say that. As for timing, I'm skeptical that we couldn't have done this earlier. We did a lot during the pandemic. A lot of it was good. Convert a lot of bars into restaurants and things that allowed people to keep going. That's good work. The agency should be proud of a lot of the things that it did during the pandemic. But I don't buy the idea that we couldn't have done this before today. This is being presented to us as a fait accompli. I don't like that, and I shouldn't. We should be allowed to have enough time to work through these issues rather than be presented with these things so late that we can't really do anything with them. So again, good work on this, truly fantastic job. I don't like what we're doing, and I don't like how we're being asked to do it. Thank you.
Commissioner Mack.
Shannon, tremendous work, your team, kudos to your team. The question that I have is, are we going to be monitoring the number of permits that, let's say, a drop in permits because of these fee increases, and then come back and bring it back to the commission to say, maybe this fee was a little too high. We've had 1,000 permittees in the last 4 years, but as soon as we pass this rule change, it dropped to whatever the number may be. Are you looking at that? Is your team looking at that? And will you be bringing that information back to us so we can kind of assess and see if these fees make sense in the real world application?
Absolutely. So like I said, there are a lot of variables that a lot of things changing at once, moving parts. And so once we have a solid 2 years of biennial data, then we'll actually know, what things are going to look like, how many have this kind of permit and that kind of permit, and we'll be able to reevaluate whether things need to go up or down. I think if we see something more acute than that, we can bring that to you at any time. So we will be monitoring that. And that the rule itself actually requires us to go back and take a look at these at least once every 4 years.
But you'll do it.
I think we'll be doing it sooner this first round, of course. And I did want to respond. I have some additional, if I could just explain some of our thinking on some of those factors, since you did bring that up, just where we're coming from on that. As far as geographic scope, so is it a statewide, countywide, on premises, and extent of privileges, is it beer and wine only, does it include liquor? We chose those, we identified those as logical metrics for comparing licenses and permits against one another to ensure fairness, which is that, that fees do not overly penalize any segment of the alcoholic beverage industry. So we tried to identify these consistent, clear representative metrics to maximize the neutrality and the objectivity. So, because that's kind of a squishy standard. So we were trying to find metrics that would correlate, that we could point to, that might help us with that. And as far as the higher public safety risks, it's part of accounting for the disproportionate amount of our law enforcement resources that are expended in policing such businesses. So the regulatory activity, it's part of the regulatory activity associated with the license and permit type. For example, mixed beverage permittees and off-premises retailers like convenience stores make up the vast majority of our law enforcement operations, like underage compliance and complaints, with all the other permit types way behind that. So we felt like those considerations did fall within the four corners of that, of the alcohol beverage code 5.5. We're just trying to come up with some good metrics there.
Thank you.
Follow up,
Commissioner Matt?
just so I make sure I'm clear, we can reduce any fee that's been proposed and not have to republish.
That, yes, that's,
But if we increase anything as a result of moving lower on one and trying to keep that same revenue target and increase something else, we're in a situation there.
I believe that fee would have to be republished, yes, but it could be broken out.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, so I have one, and I understand that there is always a subjective feature. I mean, in my world, which is very much fee-centric, we try to impose best practices, competitive nature. Obviously, this is not a private business. But I'd asked, you know, and I know it's somewhere, but I'd like to see it, for all of us to see it, sort of if there was an algorithm or some kind of formulaic approach, and understand it cannot be perfectly formalized. That's even a proper word. But is there something that we can see that kind of gives a sense that it's not just arbitrary, that it's not just, okay, well, you know, beer guy's this, wine guy's this, you know, which would include the competitive nature. And to compare us to, I don't know, Rhode Island is probably not relevant. Maybe to compare us to California in certain cases might be, right? So is there can you break that down so that I can look at somebody and say, yeah, it's not perfect, but this was the methodology and this was the math.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that for you.
Is that helpful to you guys?
Any other commissioners that want to see that?
Yeah, I mean, look, you have to defend your rank, right? You have to defend the command decisions that you make, and people aren't happy, right? And so if we have to make decisions, we need to at least look at somebody and say, this was not just, we just sort of pulled this out of the, to echo
I
you.
couldn't agree more. Like that would be, it's not like I asked you for that and you didn't get it. No, you couldn't have been better. It would have been great to have that today. It would have been great to have that 6 months ago. It would have been great to have it a year ago.
Yeah, so what I was sort of, look, you guys are under a lot of, you've been working your tail off, and we do appreciate it. I think that I would have liked to see maybe a PPM today with some charts and graphs. And this is how California does it. This is how North Carolina, these are the top 5 beer producing states, the top 5 wine producing states. This is how they charge. I think it's an interesting out of state versus in state. I see that as an issue, right? You know, I've been public in saying I want us to, one day I would, in my lifetime, probably not. I'd love for us to exceed California in wine production. May not happen, but gosh, that's a goal we all want, right? I'd like to make more bourbon than Kentucky. And so I want to always be able to look at a small business and say, you know, what we're trying to do is, as what we've said from this desk over and over, that the new TABC is pro-business, pro-business, pro-business. And I want to be able to look at you and say, look, you may not exactly, I'm speaking to the gentleman in the back, you may not love what we're saying, and you can't please everybody, and anytime you raise a fee, even if you haven't done it in a decade, it's going to be a problem, and people don't like it. Nobody likes to pay more taxes. Nobody likes to pay more fees. Sometimes it has to be done. And I'm not saying we don't do it, and I'm not saying we don't rule on this, but I think I would just like more of a quantifiable metric that I can share with people when my phone explodes after this meeting. I get all my, my friends in in the beer industry, et cetera, are going to be talking to me kindly, I'm sure. So
It's a great idea, Chairman.
anyway, any other thoughts on that? So that's great.
I think really what everybody just wants, not just us, but everybody in the industry, is just more transparency.
Okay.
And again, you guys have done a great job, and you have that information. It would just be really good if we could have that as well.
So this is not a personal attack, so
Oh, no,
please understand.
I do
We just want a little more data, especially as we go through this next period of time before the public hearing. I'm sure these are going to be questions that we brought up. I hope we have a robust public hearing. I'm sure we will be. It'll probably be quite colorful. And I think certainly in our time here, we've never really had a very contentious public hearing on any.
No, we haven't.
Usually it's just kind of a non-event. So, we have to sort of put the Kevlar on, as we say, and be prepared to take some shots. And if we have to make changes, we're going to make changes, right?
Yes, sir.
So, okay. With that, we're going to proceed and vote. And so I move to approve the publication of proposed amendments to Rule 33.23 as recommended by staff. Is there a second to the motion? Second. Thank you, Commissioner Mack. We'll now vote.
We have 4 ayes and 1 nay.
Roger, thank you. Our votes have been recorded and the motion is approved. All right. Thank you for your time, everyone. And I also appreciate that in the society in which we live, disagreement is part of life, right? That's not intended to be a personal attack, but sometimes we have to disagree, to debate, to discuss. And I think what we need more of in this country is good debate, reasonable debate, and not being angry if somebody disagrees with you. So we're going to continue to work on this, and thank you for everyone's time. At this point, we're at 11:43, and we're now going to go into under Government Code 551.074 and 551.071 into executive session. The regular open session of the TABC is in recess. Time now is 11:43, Tuesday, June 15th, 2021. Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, the TABC has concluded its executive session and is now in regular open session. The date is Tuesday, June 15th, 2021, and the time is 1:29 p.m. The next is potential action on items discussed in executive session, and no action will be taken. Next is the announcement of the next meeting date. And by the way, before I do that, I want to acknowledge Commissioner Marino for the outstanding job that she did presiding over the last session. I know, isn't it fun?
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Fun.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good job.
Well,
Lying does not become you.
I was up here all by myself. It felt very empowering, right? What can I say?
All right. The next is the announcement of the next meeting date. The next scheduled commission meeting date is my birthday, August 3rd, 2021.
All right. That's my husband's birthday.
Excellent. Really?
Yes.
Is he as young as I am?
Yes.
Yeah, it's going to be my 40th. Minus plus a few. I actually will be remote. I will be on vacation, so I'll be calling in from hopefully a cooler confine. Anyone have a problem with that date?
No, sir.
We're all good? Okay, thank you. The commission is scheduled to meet on August 3rd, 2021. Next is adjournment. The time is now 1:31. We are adjourned. Enjoy the rest of your summer, folks.